Good Erev Shabbos, Parshat Behar Bechukotai 5780. The Steipler Gaon, Reb Yaakov Yisrael Kanievsky Zatzal, was known as many things. He was a towering Torah personality, a dispenser of sage advice, of Eitzah to many, and a prolific author. However, he was not necessarily known as the warm and fuzzy sort. That it was not his personality. He had an austere demeanor. He spoke in brief and blunt sentences. And let's just say he didn't stand out in his rapport with children. And furthermore, as a consummate masmid, it would have been unusual for Rav Kanievsky to have been going to public places, smachot, public appearances, so as not to detract from his intense Torah study. And so you can imagine the shock on all those in attendance at a certain bar mitzvah in Jerusalem several decades ago, when the Steipler Gaon showed up to greet the bar mitzvah boy, who was not known to anyone as someone particularly connected to the Rav, on the special day of his bar mitzvah. The murmurs could be heard around the crowd. Who was this young man? Why did he merit a special greeting all the way from Bnei Brak? One of the close disciples questioned the Steipler about his unusual behavior. He explained that years earlier he had an interaction with that young boy, and he thought that he might have inadvertently offended that boy, and so he was presented with the following halachic dilemma. You see, it is prohibited to give offense to a minor. A boy under the age of 13, a girl under the age of 12, you're not allowed to offend them, you're not allowed to insult them, even accidentally. But at the same time, a minor isn't halachically able to forgive that very offense. And so Rav Kanievsky thought he might have slighted this young boy, but he had no way, since he was a minor, to beg forgiveness. So after the incident, he inquired about the boy's birthday and his bar mitzvah, and he wrote it down so he could attend the celebration and beg forgiveness at the very first opportunity available to him. And that is why the Steipler attended the bar mitzvah. Our tzaddikim teach us about extreme lengths that we ought to go to avoid offending another person. How do we avoid offending other people? This is known as the prohibition of onoah, prohibition found in the first of this week's double parshios, Parshat Behar Bechukotai, V'lo sonu ish es amiso, yaresem elokecha ki ani Hashem elokechem. Do not persecute your fellow. You shall fear God, for I am Hashem, your God. And while there is one form of onah known as onah's mammon, that means you can't deceive someone financially. You can't rip them off. The Steipler was concerned about a second and more prevalent form of onah, known as onah's dvarim, using your words to offend, oppressing, or persecuting others. The Talmud Bavli, Maseches Bava Metzia, elaborates upon the words in a Mishnah to illustrate exactly what this means. Says the Mishnah, Daf Nun Ches Min HaBeis, Kishem she'onah b'mekach u'memker, kach onah b'dvarim. Just as onah applies when it comes to financial matters, you can't rip someone off, deceive them, cheat them out in a money exchange, so too with your words. Lo yomar lo b'kama chafet zeh v'hu eino yirotz likach. Don't tell a person, how much do you want to sell this object for, a vendor, if you have no intention of actually buying it. You lead him on, so he might conclude that you're interested in a sale. Imay abal tshuva lo yomar lo zachor ma'asecha rishonim. The person's about tshuva. They did repentance. They came back from a negative past, from a sordid past. Don't tell them, you remember what you used to be. I remember when you were not such a tzaddik, what you did when you were a little boy. Imu ben gerim, if it's a person who descends from converts, don't say to them, Zachor ma'asev osecha, remember the way of your fathers, remember the way that your ancestors used to behave. Don't think that you're so righteous because I know where you come from. We're not allowed to tell someone to remind them of a past that they'd rather avoid remembering. That's a prohibition of onah's devarim. It's a gross breach of etiquette It's deeply hurtful. Though we think about the fact that we might never do that. On the other hand, how many of us have friends who've become more observant throughout the years or serious about their Judaism over time? And perhaps it's someone who now is in yeshiva or teaching Torah, and you remember when they used to experiment with substances behind the school gymnasium. Or a childhood friend who's now a prominent community member, a solid citizen, and you recall when they were nothing to write home about, when they weren't the person who was universally respected by their peers and acquaintances. Onos Dvarim is so egregious because it's an attempt to saddle people with their former identity, the very identity they tried to escape, even as they have enthusiastically and honestly adopted a new approach in life. In the midst of the numerous interpretations of this prohibition, I want to share with you a beautiful approach. In addition to the financial coercion, deceitful business tactics, disparaging words, an approach of the great Hasidic master, Rav Naftali Tzvi Ropshitzer. The Ropshitzer offers a novel interpretation. Lo sonu ish es amito, do not persecute your fellow man. Doesn't just refer to persecuting and oppressing others. He says it also refers to oppressing ourselves. Don't oppress yourself. Don't cheat yourself out. Don't deceive yourself. And above all, don't disparage yourself or your past. I want to flesh this out for a moment. Self-deception is a shortcoming we are all aware of. To some degree, we all engage in self-deception. There are people who violate this when they believe themselves to be more virtuous, wiser, funnier, better liked than they actually are. If you've ever watched The Office, there's a character, Michael Scott. He's so hilarious and so cringeworthy at the same time because he has no self-awareness. He thinks he is so much more talented and intelligent than he actually is. He's lacking self-awareness. The social scientists David Dunning and Justin Kruger studied this very trait, and it's become known as the Dunning-Kruger effect, in which people overestimate their own levels of skill and they underestimate their own mistakes and shortcomings. It's wrong to lie to ourselves. It's wrong to do this because if we do, we will never engage in introspection, in self-honesty, and self-perfection and improvement. But in addition to being honest with ourselves, there is an alternative facet to onas dvarim and onas atzmo as it applies to us. Do not hold yourself bound to past mistakes. For if you're not allowed to remind a Baal Tshuva or a Ben Gerim of their past and their ancestry, then you mustn't remind yourself of the negative things you've done. We have to remember that our past might shape us, but it does not define us. We have to stop beating ourselves up over everything that evokes shame in our past. We mustn't revisit the broken narrative of our history, because when we do this, it violates lo sonu as atzmo. Don't persecute yourself. When we replay the negative tropes about ourselves, the embarrassing stories that we tell about our own history, we run the risk of internalizing a message and convincing ourselves that we're no better than that today. Tragically, we've come to believe that we don't have what it takes to survive a challenging time like this. That our new relationships are doomed by undesirable behavior patterns in old relationships and old life circumstances. That we can't grow spiritually or intellectually because we lack the tools, the education, so we can never make a landing on a Gemara because we didn't go to yeshiva. We can never be a everyday davening Jew because that's not who we are when we grew up. And we strive for honesty, reflection, and self-improvement, but growth is so often hindered by too much brutal honesty. For this, we all must remember the lesson of the holy Ropshitzer. Do not persecute yourself. Don't hold yourself chained and bound by your past. Instead, let us consider giving ourselves the benefit of the doubt, now more than ever before.